Hey, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Canoli Watchers, the podcast where we watch the Watchers, track the trackers, and occasionally discuss dessert pastries. I'm JC, and I'm here with Drew, as always, and we're going to deep dive into the life of Raymond Loreto Salvatore Patriarca right after this. Did you like that Sopranos picture that I snuck in?
I did.
In the AI slop mess that I had made of a introduction video. I had to do it. But yeah, our first episode today is about Raymond Ellis Patriarca. He's the man that put organized in organized crime, but barely. He has three names. Did you notice that? And you know what they say about three names. The more names you have, the more the FBI knows about you, right?
I was going to say that it meant your feet were very large.
I mean, I don't have any evidence against the size of his feet, so I can't speak to that, to be honest. He might have had the largest feet that we've known of any Italian man in existence. But Raymond, we're gonna dig in here. We got some interesting stuff about him. So this podcast is basically about some lesser known individuals within the mafia family, and I'm focusing on an Italian family right now, but we might also include the Irish mafia and some other groups as well as we move forward. But let's start off with Raymond, because Raymond was the boss of a New England mob in the 1950s all the way through the 1980s. He pretty much ran everything from an office, a very small office out of a town called Federal Hill in Providence, Rhode Island. And I just want to emphasize that when I say office, it was literally a storefront on an avenue called Atwell's. And the company was called the National Cigarette Service Company and Vending Machines. So I think you can probably imagine what they were doing. They were selling cigarettes out of vending machines. Very 50s, right? That sounds like a very 50s company.
That's something that still exists today, but only in Canada and other third world countries.
Very rarely. There's actually there's a bar back in Pennsylvania called Avi's, and they still have a cigarette machine there, or at least the last time I was there, they still had a cigarette machine.
Those are definitely unique items from the past.
Yeah, it's almost I would imagine they're probably somewhat of a collector's item. There's somebody probably out there got a basement full of them, right? Just loaded with unfiltered Lucky Strikes and Pell-Mells.
That's actually the reason why Frank from American Pickers died. Too much ingestion of the nicotine, diving in those barns looking for that.
Yeah, he looked like he was a man that enjoyed his unfiltered Lucky Strikes, for sure. But nothing says a legitimate business like a cigarette vending machine company that somehow controls gambling, loan sharking, and protection racketeering across 6 different states. So maybe the cigarettes were a cover, but to be fair, in the 1950s, everyone smoked. Doctors, pregnant women, that dude down the street that was always bumming a cigarette off you at the bus stop, that dude smoked. So how do you run a legitimate cigarette business and a crime empire? Well, I'll tell you how. It takes a lot of multitasking. It's basically the American dream. But before we get into the more absurd parts of Raymond's career, let me set the scene a little bit here. So Raymond was born in 1908, in Worcester, Massachusetts, to Italian immigrants. And nothing says mob capital of America like Worcester, Massachusetts. So that's basically like me saying that I'm from the mean streets of Des Moines, Iowa. Hey, Worcester, it had its moment, right? But Raymond's family moved to Providence when he was young, and that's where he really found his calling: crime. Or as I like to call it, entrepreneurship with flexible ethics. Whoosh. I don't have the sound effect ready for that. So how about we talk about Raymond's early career? He got his start in the 1920s and 1930s doing usual stuff like hijacking, armed robbery, entry-level mob stuff. Kind of like an unpaid internship, but with more prison time and fewer coffee runs. But he did serve prison time multiple times. His first arrest was in 1926 when he was 18 years old. But what did he do? He broke into a factory, got caught immediately. So kind of foreshadowing for the rest of his criminal career here, by the way. We're not going to speculate on Raymond's intelligence during this episode. But I'll let the audience grade that however they please. Here's where it gets really funny. In the 1930s, Raymond had a genius plan. He decided to rob a shoe store in Massachusetts. A shoe store, not a bank, not a jewelry store, not a high-end boutique, just shoes. Was there a sale? No. Was he trying to get a good deal on wingtips? No. Did he need new loafers for a wedding? No. He got caught, obviously, and served time in the Massachusetts State Prison. This is the man that would eventually control organized crime all throughout New England, and he couldn't successfully rob a Payless shoe source.
Now, was it actually Payless brand, or
no, no, it was just a shoe store. But I was laughing at my own my own reference there. It was just some shoe store. I couldn't find the name of the shoe store. But yeah, he was immediately caught. So in his defense, the early Air Jordans were very valuable, although they didn't exist yet. So that's probably why he failed. But he was ahead of his time. If he waited until 1985, he could have made $1 million robbing shoe stores. If that's how it works. I mean, I've never robbed a shoe store before. But he also got arrested for hijacking. Have you?
No, I was going to say if he waited until the 80s to do it, then he would get his butt kicked by Al Bundy.
He would have. But in his defense, he also got arrested for hijacking trucks, armed robbery, and some other charges throughout his 30s. And all I can say is this man was building quite the LinkedIn career. But for criminals, skills include hijacking, shoe theft, getting constantly caught. I don't have the sound effects, so just imagine a prison door slamming shut right now. After multiple arrests and prison stints, Raymond finally started to wise up in the 1940s. He realized that maybe he should stop doing the crimes himself and start managing other people who do crimes. Middle management. We're all familiar with that. And this is where Raymond actually showed some intelligence. He started working his way up the mob hierarchy, making connections, proving himself reliable. By the late 1940s, he was working under the previous boss of the New England mob, and by 1954, he'd taken over the whole operation. He worked his way up the ladder pretty quickly there. That's a span of, 10 to 14 years? And he's already at the top? So this is where the office comes in. So he set up his headquarters at 168 Atwell Avenue on Providence's Federal Hill neighborhood. Again, it was just a vending machine company storefront. So like the FBI definitely knew what was going on there. I think probably everybody knew. It was probably the worst kept secret of Rhode Island. He would show up every day, park his Cadillac in the front, and just kind of run the mob from his tiny New England office. It's kind of amazing that he did that while managing the vending machines as well. Like it was a real business, but also crime headquarters. I guess it's called diversification for the Wall Street savvy folks out there. Multiple revenue streams. Yes, officer, I'm just here to service a cigarette machine. Also to order a hit, but mainly a cigarette machine. So the FBI, understandably, was very interested in what Raymond was doing at the office. And in 1962, they did something pretty bold for the time. They bugged it. They installed listening devices in the office and proceeded to record hundreds of hours of Raymond conducting business. So this is actually one of the most famous FBI surveillance operations from that area, or from that era. They had tapes of Raymond's office, and they're actually pretty hilarious. You can find them online, but they're not intentionally hilarious. But because it's Raymond doing it and his particular management style, that's what makes it funny. So he was kind of like a corporate CEO. He would literally take meetings, settle disputes, give advice. It was basically The Sopranos, but in real life and worse sound quality. The FBI tapes captured Raymond mediating disputes between different crime families, discussing business operations, and he would even complain about the cigarette vending machines on tape that he was selling from the storefront. His own cigarette vending machines. So, I mean, in reality, I would pay good money to hear Raymond Patriarca troubleshooting a jam cigarette dispenser between ordering hits. He's going to be like, yeah, we got to take care of this guy from Boston. Also, the machine on Westminster Street ate someone's quarter. We need to maintain our reputation for quality customer service. We're criminals, but we're not animals. We give refunds.
A hitman.
I'm honestly trying not to laugh at this dumb stuff that I've already read through and already laughed about. So what's really interesting about these tapes is that they show Raymond was actually a pretty effective manager, honestly. He was organized, methodical, and people respected him. They called him the man, not the boss or the Don, like, you know, what people expect when they hear about the Italian Mafia. He was just the man. Like, he was so powerful, he didn't even need a fancy title. Other crime families from New York, Boston, even other parts of the country would come to Raymond and settle their disputes. He was doing conflict resolution. For those in HR, you'll be familiar with that. So he was the mob mediator. Should have gotten a certificate. Raymond Ellis Patriarca, certified conflict resolution specialist. Also murder conspirator. It's all about that work-life balance. Somebody laugh. But I want to start off with my favorite Raymond story. And this is where we really see the duality of his competence and his complete incompetence. So it's the 1960s, okay? And Raymond knows the FBI is watching him. He's not sure if he's phone tapped, but spoiler alert, he definitely was. And he's very paranoid about it. Reasonably paranoid. Very reasonable. So he decides to start speaking in code on the phone to hide his criminal activities, which normally you would think was smart, right? Code. Oh, that's really gonna cover up for us. So he would call up his associates and say things like, "Hey, did you talk to our friend about the thing we discussed at the place?" Literally his words. That was his code. Friend, thing, place.
I mean, that's uncrackable. That's a wind talker code.
It's the Pandora's box. That's just being vague. The FBI agents listening to the tapes were like, "Yeah, we know exactly what you're talking about, Raymond." It's like when a kid tries to steal cookies by saying, "Mom, I can't have the items from the location in the room." And the mom is like, "You mean cookies in the jar from the kitchen?" No. So the FBI had no trouble deciphering Raymond's super secret code. None whatsoever. In fact, they used these tapes as evidence against him later in court. He basically created his own evidence trail by trying to be sneaky. So it's kind of like when criminals post about their crimes on Facebook, except that this was before Facebook. So Raymond was ahead of his time again. He was an innovator in self-incrimination. But wait, there's more. Raymond also had the habit of discussing every specific criminal activity on these supposed coded calls. He talked about specific people, specific amounts of money, specific locations. So this code was just replacing names with friends and places with place, but then giving enough context clues that anyone could figure it out. So Raymond was basically playing Mad Lib. with the FBI. Raymond's Patriarcha's crime Mad Libs. Today I need to verb the noun at the place because he owes us the number of dollars. I'm sure a lot could figure that out. All right. So let's talk about one of Raymond's quirks. He had an obsession with record keeping. Excel would be his best friend right now. He kept meticulous records of his illegal activities. Dumb. And I mean, they were meticulous. Spreadsheets, ledgers, written documentation of loans, collections, gambling operations, everything. He was running QuickBooks for crime. It's actually kind of impressive from an organizational standpoint. He knew exactly who owed what, who paid, who didn't pay, interest rates, collection dates, which is great for running an efficient criminal organization, but terrible for operational security. When the FBI raided his office, they found literal receipts of his crime, like itemized documentation of illegal activities. He wrote everything down. He had he had a list of all of his crimes that he was committing as a receipt. Like, here you go. I did that. Your Honor, I can see from Exhibit A, which Mr. Patriarca helpfully labeled illegal loans, Q3 1967. He was clearly documented every illegal loan he made with interest rates and collection dates. And if you'll direct your attention to Exhibit B, people who need to be whacked, priority list. Okay, I don't know if it was labeled like that, but definitely kept detailed records that implicated himself in various crimes, so I can only imagine. I mean, wouldn't you? You want, you're kind of impressing yourself. You gotta impress others. You want to have a resume that has all of your work on it in case he needs to apply for another job. But he should have used TurboTax. At least that's encrypted. Wait a minute. Yeah, let's not talk about the TurboTax thing. Don't use TurboTax. But seriously, the attention to detail is what Raymond, it's what made him successful and vulnerable at the same time. He ran his organization too much like a business, like it was an actual legal operation, which in a way was kind of smart. But he forgot that businesses have to follow laws. Small oversight on his part. So with all the evidence that was piling up against Raymond, he eventually got caught. Multiple times, actually. But the big one was in 1970. He was convicted of conspiracy to murder. Conspiracy to murder. Not even actual murder. He didn't even commit the murder himself. What a bitch. He couldn't even get that right. Well, to be fair, conspiracy to murder means he planned it but didn't do it himself, like I just said. Which, as the boss, makes sense. He wasn't getting his hands dirty at that point. So what happened? He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but only served about 5. Got out in 1975 and went right back to running things. Wink, wink, good lawyer. 5 years in the can. Probably had a private room. Probably had access to a kitchen and was making spaghetti every day. I don't know how prison works. I would assume for mobsters, it was something like that. There was a movie about that, right? So the 1970s justice system was kind of like, yeah, 5 years, that seems fair for planning murder, different times, different places. Also, like I said, he had good lawyers, of course. Best lawyers mob money could buy. And here's the thing. Even while he was in prison, he was still running the organization. He had visitors, was making phone calls, was passing messages. So prison was basically just like a temporary vacation or an office relocation for him in a way. It's like when your company makes you work from home, but you're still doing all of your regular work. I don't know anything about that. Sorry, can't make the meeting today. I'm in federal prison, but I'll dial in. That was a bad joke. I don't know why I included that. When Raymond got out in 1975, he just picked up where he left off. Back to the office. Back to the vending machines. Back to running New England. He had job security. Wish we all had that. So Raymond stayed in power pretty much till he died in 1984. Rest in peace, Raymond. But here's the crazy part. He died of natural causes in his own bed. That's like winning the mob lottery. For a mob boss, that's like rolling a natural 20 in Dungeons and Dragons. Oof. That's a far reach of a joke there. I don't know how many people will get that one. Most mob bosses did not just retire peacefully like Raymond did. They usually ended up in prison forever or dead. Raymond managed to die of a heart attack at the age of 76, having run one of the most powerful crime families in America for 3 decades. 3 decades that this guy running vending machines that sold cigarettes and was in and out of prison. I'm not going to lie, that's kind of impressive. I could only imagine doing something cool like that. So what happened after he died? His son Raymond Jr. took over the family business. Nepotism in the mob? Who would ever guess? So how did that work out? Not great, turns out. Raymond Jr. did not have his father's skills or respect. It's almost like successfully running a criminal enterprise requires a specific skill that you don't automatically transfer through DNA. So the New England mob, unfortunately, or fortunately, basically fell apart at that point in the late 80s and 90s. Raymond Jr. got indicted. People started flipping, becoming informants, and the whole thing collapsed. So the lesson here is don't give your kids the job just because they're your kids. They need to earn it by robbing shoe stores first. The traditional path. So I want to talk about some of Raymond's other memorable moments now that we kind of went through a quick history of his career, because there are so many good ones. Where do we even start? How about the time he tried to rig a horse race? In the 1960s, Raymond got involved in a scheme to fix horse races where they would drug the horses with drugs, not like drag them on the ground. They drugged the horses, bribed the jockeys, the whole deal. Classic move. Except they got caught because someone involved in the scheme started talking to the FBI, or Raymond just decided to write a whole book about it because that's what he liked to do.
Give the thing to that animal that has the guy on it.
Put the object that looks like a pill in the animal's hole where it eats.
Go to the stable with the drugs.
Oh no, drugs is too focused. But there's always that one guy in a in any group, friend group, mob group, whatever it might be, always. So the FBI built a whole case around it. Raymond somehow managed to avoid serious charges from that particular incident, but it was another example of his operation being just a little bit too ambitious. Like, he was way too out in the open with that. He's really bad at the whole don't get caught part of being a criminal. But to be fair, he got caught a lot. But aside from that 5-year prison stint and dying, he didn't really face a whole lot of consequences in his career. So what was his relationship like with other crime families, somebody might ask? Interesting. Raymond had a very complicated relationship with the New York families. He was independent, running his own territory, but he also needed to maintain that relationship with these bigger families in like Boston and New York City. So what did he do? Political maneuvering. And Raymond was actually pretty good at this. He attended mob meetings, paid respect when needed, but also managed to maintain his autonomy in Providence. He was like the Switzerland of mob bosses in a way. Neutral, but definitely involved in the crimes. But he managed to avoid the mob wars that plagued other families by being a mediator. People came to him to solve their problems rather than him being the problem. And he definitely was a part of many of those problems for sure. Let's not romanticize that too much. The man was involved in murder, extortion, loan sharking, gambling. He did ruin a lot of lives, including his own. But an important reminder, we're laughing at his incompetence, not celebrating his crimes yet. He was a criminal who happened to do some fun, dummy stuff along the way. So let's focus our attention on some of his business operations, because they were pretty extensive. He had his hands in everything. Gambling was probably his biggest moneymaker. He controlled number rackets, sports betting, dice games, the whole shebang all across New England. The number racket was huge back then. For those who don't know, it's kind of like an illegal lottery. People would bet on like 2 or 3 digit numbers, and if their number came up, they'd win. Raymond controlled most of the number operations in Rhode Island and certain parts of Massachusetts. He did loan sharping. He did loan sharping. He did loan sharking, where he lended money at ridiculous high interest rates. And if you didn't pay, well, they made things a little bit unpleasant for you. Kneecaps were broken, that sort of thing. Normal everyday stuff. Right?
I have to do that every time I loan my Sharpie too.
That's we're gonna do an episode on the inventor of the Sharpie now for the next one. But it was kind of like insurance in a way, like he offered them protection, they paid him money, and that was the insurance. If you effed with that business, you usually ended up at the bottom of a river. So he ran illegal gambling houses, multiple illegal gambling houses that included poker games, dice games, and card games, all illegal. Gambling was illegal at that time. But they all generated revenue for Raymond and his family. I guess you could say he had a diversified portfolio. It's okay. But he really did. And this is where his business acumen actually showed. He knew how to run operations efficiently, how to collect money, how to keep people in line. He just couldn't manage to not create documented evidence of all this every step of the way that would be later used against him in court. The downfall of every great mathematician. Minor flaw, otherwise, great plan. Solid business plan. But one thing I haven't talked about much is how Raymond dealt with the press and the public. His public perception was very important to him. And there are people now that it's very important to as well. So it's a little interesting because Raymond wasn't actually a flashy mob boss. If you look up pictures of him, he wore mid-range suits. It wasn't anything fancy. He wasn't wearing Armani or anything like that. And he smoked the normal cigarettes, Lucky Strike, Pall Mall, and had his imported Cuban cigars, but he wasn't like a flashy, I don't even know if I want to call John Gotti a flashy mob boss. Maybe with like when all the media and stuff was happening, but he was very conscious of his public image. So he did have a very low profile, especially compared to other mob bosses of his era. Except for everyone still knew who he was. It wasn't a secret. Newspapers knew. They called him mob boss. The FBI was openly investigating him. It was known to the public that he was being investigated, but he somehow managed to maintain a facade that he was a legitimate businessman. I'm just a vending machine business. I don't know why everyone keeps accusing me of crimes. And when reporters would ask him about the mob stuff, he would just deny everything. Shocking. Defining strategy. There's a great story about a reporter asking Raymond if he was the head of organized crime in New England. You can look the clip up. I believe it's just an audio clip, but he directly asks him, "Hey, do you run this organized crime in New England?" Raymond just looked at him and said, "I'm a businessman. I don't know what you're talking about." And that is the famous quote from Raymond Patriarca. "I'm just a businessman. I don't know what you're talking about." Put that in your work signature, and it will go over well with everybody. So let's talk about some of his run-ins with law enforcement beyond his main convictions, because he had so many. Throughout his career, Raymond was arrested and brought in for questioning over a dozen times. Most of the time, though, nothing stuck. He did keep getting away with it. Good lawyers, lack of evidence, witnesses who mysteriously refused to testify or disappeared. I wonder if Raymond Patriarca's name is in the Epstein files. I haven't checked. Proving mob activity was actually harder back then. We didn't have this interconnected world like we do now. Fingerprinting was basically non-existent at this time, and even the little bit of fingerprinting technology that was available was almost not admissible in court. A lot of that kind of evidence wasn't even admissible in court yet, until RICO laws eventually started to catch up with him and other mobs. That the law was enacted in 1970, and it did take a pretty good hit on a lot of the organized crime at the time. Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act is what RICO stands for, and it basically made it easier to prosecute mob bosses for ordering crimes rather than committing them directly. The RICO Act was specifically passed for mob bosses, like for the mob. Like that's what that originally was passed for. So before Raymond could just be like, I didn't personally murder anybody, I just suggested that somebody should be murdered, the law was catching up to the mob. It did take a while. But Raymond was operating in the golden age of mob bosses where they could get away with a lot more. By the time the law really caught up with Raymond, he was in his 60s and 70s. He had a good run, a long crime-filled run. I mean, 70 years old, being the New England mob boss and dying naturally, that didn't happen a whole lot at all.
It looks like he also got out of a prison stint in 1980 because his lawyer said that his heart wouldn't make it through trial.
Yes. His lawyer successfully argued that not only the physical condition of his heart, but his mental condition and spiritual condition was degraded enough that he would not survive the trial. That would never hold up in a court today. I shouldn't say never. Would rarely hold up in a court today to use that as a defense to completely. I think he took a plea deal on that, if I'm remembering correctly. But imagine using that as your defense. I don't know, boys. I don't think my heart's going to make it through this trial.
And then to live 6 more years, that judge had to have been like kicking himself.
Shit.
They got me again.
Why do I keep getting tricked by these guys? So I do want to talk about Raymond's personal life, his family life, because honestly, Raymond was a family man. I mean, a lot of these Italian mobsters, of course, Italians and other cultures are big on family. So this added an entire new layer to the whole story. So Raymond was married to Helen Patriarca, and they had a son, Raymond Jr., who we talked about. And by all accounts, Raymond tried to keep his family life separate from his business life. He protected his family completely. Like, think about, I mentioned The Sopranos again, but you think about the show The Sopranos, and Tony always tried to keep his family out of it in a way. He didn't want his son to be involved in it. His daughter in the show always knew that he was a mob boss, but would never say it. And it was essentially it was stereotypical like that. So his wife and son actually lived pretty normal lives. Junior went to school, had a normal childhood, aside from the whole thing that his dad was a notorious mob boss. Just a minor detail. Raymond apparently tried to be a good father in that context. He wanted his son to take over the business eventually, which happened. But as we discussed, that didn't go great for him. Junior just didn't have the personality for it. He wasn't respected, wasn't smart about it. I mean, I can't really say that Raymond Sr. was smart about it, but wasn't entirely Junior's fault. The game had changed by the time that he had come into power in the 80s, and he made some pretty bad decisions. Got caught on wiretaps, trusted the wrong people, kept detailed records of his crimes, just like his dad. What is it with this family and writing down everything that they do? I took a piss at 3 a.m. and then I ordered a hit. All right. Let's lock in, chat. Let's wrap this one up. Let's talk about Raymond's legacy. Big words, right? Legacy. But he did have one. Raymond Patriarca was one of the longest serving mob bosses in American history. 30 years he was the mob boss. He survived longer than almost all of his contemporaries. He saw other mob bosses get killed, imprisoned for life, pushed out, and he maintained control of a huge territory. I shouldn't say all, but he controlled 6 New England states. Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. That's a lot of territory for a mob boss to control. You think about mob bosses, you had like Philadelphia, Boston, New York City, the Northern Jerseys. They weren't multiple state mobs like what Raymond was controlling. But then you name some of the states, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, you realize that nobody of Italian heritage lives there. So he had a few confidants in those states, I'm assuming. But honestly, his control over Rhode Island and Massachusetts was pretty ironclad at the time and for decades. And he did all of this while for those 30 years he was under constant FBI surveillance, which kind of makes his success a little bit impressive because he was being watched constantly and he still managed to pull us all off. But he got caught a lot, like I had mentioned before. So what's our final assessment of Raymond Patriarca? Criminal genius or just a lucky idiot? I think it's a little bit of both. He was smart enough to rise up to the top and stay there. He knew the right lawyers. Somehow, even with all the physical evidence that he left behind, he was still able to get out of a lot of the crimes, and I'm sure that a lot of his underbosses and his soldiers were probably imprisoned instead of him. But he was competent enough that he commanded the respect of other crime families, that they would come to him, as I mentioned. And he was also incompetent enough that he couldn't rob a shoe store. So he was the perfect mix of a shrewd businessman and a complete doofus, which we would call the duality of man. So he understood the power dynamics. He knew how to manage people, built a successful criminal enterprise, but he also caught multiple times doing crimes because he essentially created evidence against himself. It's like he read How to Run a Criminal Enterprise, but skipped a chapter on how not to get caught, or read it, but that doesn't apply to me. Classic overconfidence. But you know what's interesting? Raymond's story is also a story about the decline of the traditional mob. He came up in the golden age of organized crime and died right as it was falling apart. The FBI got better at investigating. RICO laws made prosecutions easier. Informants started talking, and the mob's traditional revenue stream started disappearing. Gambling became legal in many places. Loan sharking got harder as legitimate lending became more accessible. The world was changing around Raymond, but he kept doing things the old way, which worked for him, right up until he died. But it didn't work for the next generation. His son couldn't adapt the new reality of law enforcement and changing criminal landscapes. And that's probably the real lesson here. Raymond succeeded in a specific era, but that era was ending. He was like Blockbuster Video in a way, dominant for decades and suddenly obsolete. Sorry, Raymond. The Netflix of organized crime killed the Blockbuster of traditional mob operations. Although I'm not sure what the Netflix equivalent would be in this metaphor: modern cybercrime, international drug cartels, corporate fraud. This podcast? Crime has gone digital. Raymond, you got to keep up. You'll probably be confused by the Bitcoin scams. Back in my day, we extorted people face to face. Kids these days, they're phishing emails with their ransomware. Get off my lawn. So what have we learned today about Raymond L.S. Patriarca? That you can rob a shoe store, run a cigarette vending machine company, keep detailed records of your crimes, speak in terrible code on tapped phone lines, and still become one of the most powerful mob bosses in American history. The bar was truly the floor. But hey, he commanded respect. He kept peace, relatively speaking, and he died peacefully of old age in his own bed, which is more than we can say for most people in that line of work. He lived to be 76, ruled his territory for 3 decades. That's a success story if you ignore all the other crimes, which we shouldn't. Definitely not, right? But we can appreciate the absurdity of his methods while acknowledging he was involved in serious criminal activity that hurt people. It's possible to laugh at someone's incompetence while still recognize that they were a bad person doing bad things. He was somehow both competent and ridiculous, successful and frequently caught, respected and documented all of his crimes like an idiot. Or in this case, I guess not the duality of man, but maybe the multiplicity of man. He was many things, and a lot of them were contradictory, but maybe that's what made him successful. He's actually a fascinating character in American crime history. I honestly, this was just such a high level view of Raymond Patriarca. I encourage everybody to do some research and look into him. There's a couple good YouTube videos about him. He was definitely an interesting man. Maybe not the most prudent in some ways, but interesting enough to check out on a Saturday night if you don't have anything better to do. Drew, what are your final thoughts on Raymond Patriarca here? What do you think? Do you think he was an idiot? Do you think he was a genius? A little bit of both?
Yeah.
Andrew has died. No, he's back.
No.
Just kidding, folks. Can't hear you, buddy.
Why?
Now we can hear you. You came in right the last second screaming. It's all good. For anybody that Talk Studio has been giving us problems for quite a few months, so bear with us as we try to work around this. I'll pass it back over to Drew for his thoughts.
I was just trying to say that I think he's the Michael Scott of the Mafia.
If they were to make a documentary about it, I would expect it to be done in the style of The Office, especially because he actually called his vending storefront The Office.
Right.
So it fits
What do you
in perfectly.
I'm just a businessman. I don't know anything about that.
I want that on a t-shirt. That's kind of like oh no, I'm going to embarrass myself here. The Cincinnati coach, Reds coach. They oh come on.
I don't follow that. I don't follow baseball, dude.
I know, not Terry Francona. He's the current coach.
Terry Funk.
Yeah, Terry Funk. This is embarrassing. Pete Rose. Why could I not remember Pete Rose? It's kind of like Pete Rose in a way, right? I wasn't betting on the game, but yeah, the wrestler, absolutely. Did he wrestle the gobbledygook?
Yes.
That's a 5-star match according to Dave Meltzer. But you might want to look that up. Don't fact check me on that. So that's it for this episode of Canoli Watchers. Our first episode. It'll get better as we move on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive of Raymond. Raymond LS Patriarca. And if you enjoyed this episode, check out all the other stuff that we got on YouTube and your favorite podcasting app. We have episodes going back years now. We've been a podcast for so long. It's crazy. Go give us a view, a couple likes if you can, and make sure you share it with your friends, unless your friends are currently planning crimes, in which case, if they are, you might want to send that over an encrypted channel to us so we can be involved, but maybe don't. We don't endorse crime, everybody, just in case you think that we do. We just talk about historical crimes in a humorous way for legal reasons. That's very important to clarify. I had to run that by a lawyer. So join us next time as we discuss whether the cannoli at Mike's Pastry are actually better than modern pastry, a debate that has torn families apart and may require federal mediation. So there's a little hint at the next episode. I feel like I'm gonna have to start like bringing a cannoli to this to eat. Like I'm not even dressed. I literally bought an outfit for this. I'm not even prepared for the first episode. Man, I am just as bad as Raymond at this.
I didn't even put a shirt on.
In case anyone who is watching this on video, Drew is wearing a bathrobe right now, exposing his little Raymond Juniors for the world to see. All right. What a terrible thing we just did. Until next time, keep watching those cannolis, and remember, don't keep detailed records of your crime. That's just good life advice. Ciao beno.